So to recap where we've been before, we created some artwork or had some artwork in Illustrator. We adapted it ready for video. We brought it in, we also stacked it in layers in Illustrator. We then brought it into After Effects and we've animated the various elements over time. So we get this transitional white, then we get a sequential fade of the word Acumen, and then finally we get the whole strap line fading in before everything fades off to black. That's our animation in a nutshell. So now what do we do with it? Well, we need to export it. So the first option we're going to look at is exporting as a video. I've saved it as a final version, so we can just hit save. Okay, so I've renamed it so that I'm not writing over my previous versions, just in case. Bear in mind that on machines especially, I've got not the newest graphic card in here. It's okay, but not super powerful. And when I load, sometimes I get warnings about graphic card timings and having the right drivers, etc. So it's a good chance when you go to render, if it's going to crash in After Effects, it's 9 times out of 10, it's when you go to render. Okay, so always good to save beforehand. I'm going to select the composition. Okay, we've only got one here, which is where this is what we're looking at down here, this composition. I'm going to go up to File, and I'm going to go to Export, and I'm going to choose Add to Render Queue. Now, I've got a more powerful graphic card in my PC, but the downside of it is that I don't get the option to output to the format I want. Okay, this is my earlier test render, so I can just get rid of that one. So we're dealing with this one here. You've probably only got one showing up. Okay, now I don't get the chance to export directly from here to H.264, which is the standard format I tend to share video with. It goes with virtually every web browser, can play on virtually every device, and it's kind of universally accepted as probably the best current video format to output to. Okay, so you can see here that we've added the project to render queue, this second one here. Okay, let's just give it a color so we can see it, pink. In fact, let's give it a brighter color. Pick a color we can see, cyan. So this cyan one here, it's got best settings as a render option. What that means is it's going to output the best quality, highest quality, full resolution, 1920 1080 in this case. And you can see there are some other options here. I'm not going to touch any of these. In fact, I'm not changing any of this. I'm going to hit cancel. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that on best settings. The next thing is what output mode you want to put it into. This is where you'd normally choose a format. Now, unfortunately, because I'm on a PC here, I don't get the option of choosing H.264. The only thing similar is QuickTime, and I think you have to have QuickTime Pro in order to choose within QuickTime what format. So QuickTime Pro is sort of almost not supported now. I still normally have it installed on my machines, but obviously you guys won't, and therefore I'm not going to use that. So we leave it on the default of AVI, and you can see here we have video out. We have different things if we want to resize and crop. None of that's on, and we have audio. Now we don't have any audio, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn audio off. Okay, no need to output an audio file if there isn't any, and I'm going to hit OK. So that's going to make it look like we've got custom settings here, which it is. We've got the standard AVI settings, and then we've turned off the audio. Then I want to output this. What am I going to call it? So let's call it Adobe Acumen logo animation. Instead of layers to After Effects, I'm going to put video. Okay, and you'll see that it's adding the .avi extension. I'm putting this in the desktop, and I'm going to hit save. Okay, now we've got it all set up. We now want to hit render. Now I'll also remind you that there is this option as well, which is Adobe Media Encoder, which is a separate package that usually will be installed automatically with Creative Cloud, but if you've got limited space, you might have uninstalled it or whatever, you can install it. And in theory, I think this may allow me to render to H.264 directly from here, but I don't want to open another package. We're just sticking to 3, Illustrator, After Effects, and then the sort of body moving workflow. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit render on here. It's going to go away, and you'll see it sort of keyframe. Now, if you've got a much more complex animation than mine and it's grinding, you may want to pause or stop, and you may want to do some pre-composition. I'm not going to talk about that any greater here, but what that does is you kind of pre-render elements, which makes it less of a headache for After Effects. It's not computing 1,000 layers of transitions, transparency, and all these different settings in one go. You can do things like your basic animation, and then let's say I wanted to spin this whole logo while it was revealing. I could put it in a pre-comp and then spin that pre-comp. So it's kind of like objects within objects. Okay, but subject for a proper After Effects tutorial, not my kind of quick hack Illustrator, animate, and output as Lottie. Okay, so in here what we're going to do instead is we've now rendered that. Let's have a look at it in the desktop. Down here should be somewhere in here. Where are we? Pretty sure I was rendering it into here. Oh, it's at the bottom. And let's look at the size. It's insane. 1.73 gig. Could do a whole movie in that. And I've got 10-second animation at 1.73 gig. So we definitely don't want to leave it there in terms of outputting. So the next thing I would use is I would use a tool called Handbrake. This is a free app you can download off the internet. Make sure you get the legit source for it. Okay, and it is awesome. I have it on every machine that I use and do any kind of video or rendering on. So Handbrake allows me to drag in a file, for example, the AVI. It goes away and it reads it, and then I get some options. So I'm going to choose MPEG-4. You could do Makarov or even web mobile, but I'm going to choose MPEG-4 because then it's also good for TV as well as potentially the web. I'm going to choose Web Optimize just for the hell of it. And that's about it. If we looked under filters, you can see it's using the default H.264. I'm not changing that. There are other options, but I'm going to leave it on this. H.264 is a codec for the MPEG-4 format, which stands for Motion Picture Experts Group Level 4. There's also MPEG-5, which are these, but I'm not using those because they're not supported on every browser. So I'm just leaving it on the defaults. As you'll see, because we removed audio, there is no audio. So let's see how small it can render that. What I want to do is change the location because it keeps trying to put it in my video folders. So I'll stick it in the same place, and it's going to end with this M4V extension. So I'll just hit save there, and then I'm going to hit start encode. It's not going to take long. It's going to rip through it pretty quickly. You can see the file appearing in the background here in the meantime, and it's done. Normally there's like a strange little ring sound, but I'll probably turn that off on my capture thing. Okay, so that has turned my 1.73 gig file into a 77 kilobyte animation. Okay, now it's still, unfortunately, it is now a compressed bitmap. So the only reason you'd want to keep something like this is if I was now going to put that into Premiere and After Effects and do something else with it and then re-render. This is a lossless compression. In other words, I'm not going to find I get strange little artifacts in the black in the background, which will come out when I start putting an adjustment on it in Premiere. So if you're working in Premiere, you want to keep these huge files. But for purposes of what we will be outputting, I will just play this using VLC. I don't want Windows to try and open it because it tends to make a mess of it. Open with, and then VLC player. Don't think it likes the M4V codec. And you can see here, there's my animation at 1080p resolution, but it is pixelated. You know, if I were to come part way through and zoom in, it's the subtitle scale. I don't know if you can zoom in VLC. Zoom. Let's go into double. It's ignoring me. You'd see that it's pixels. Okay, but still 77K is not too bad as a video file. The problem is that you're rendering all this black and everything. Okay, so it's not as great as it might seem. So let's get rid of that. And what we're going to do in the next tutorial is I'm going to delete this as well because I don't want to use up my hard drive. So I don't want to keep the 1.7 gig version for what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm done with that. Next phase, what we're going to do in the next one is we're going to render this out ready for Lottie files. Okay, so I'm going to just close off the render queue, make sure I've saved, and it will keep those settings for future. Okay, in the project. See you in the next tutorial.